our Saturday Live. I'm Rowan, your host of today. For those who are on celebrations and vacations this weekend, please travel safe and happy Diwali in advance. Our today topic is interest rates. How high is too high? With the subtopic of how high will the US interest rate rise to? And how will this affect Malaysia's interest rates and ringgit? Do follow us on Capital Dynamics on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Capital Dynamics Group for LinkedIn, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have prepared a poll question for you, so please join and share your thoughts. For those who are watching live, please stay on our page just in case you accidentally log out your page. You may search for Capital Dynamics and press our logo for that so you can continue to watch the live. Please help us to share the live and also don't forget to like our page. So as usual, we'll be giving out our special prizes for our best comment winners. So join us and ask about interest rates questions. Before we start off, we would have a wonderful news for those who want to join our part two of investment, the investment talk that you should attend now, as we are giving you exclusive promo code. All you need to do is just register our event portal and type talk BTB. That is our promo code TALK to enjoy a 70% of our discount. From that, the actual price is actually 2,000 ringgit. So by getting a 70% discount, you just need to pay a 600 ringgit to enjoy the talk. That is really a huge discount indeed. So this promo code is only limited to 10 participants by 1 p.m. So bear in mind there is no recording for this event and it is a physical event. So register now or you might regret later. Moving on, what is unique about our live is we invite the CEO of Capital Dynamics, the real Tan Teng Boo. Why I emphasize the real? That is because there's so many impersonations and scam account on social media. You can find it on Facebook, Insta, but to stress us that, please don't get cheated as the real Tan Teng Boo has no Facebook account. The only account that he would have is here at Capital Dynamics. It's extremely rare to get the CEO. So also at the same time, the fund manager to share his thought on a Saturday morning. He's willing to spend his weekly Saturday with us just to share all the thoughts and global economics outlook. Now, let's welcome Mr. Tan Teng Boo, the only fund manager who has experienced all the Malaysians bear market since 1973. Hi, welcome, Teng
Hi,
Boo. Yeah.
hi.
So, hi, Teng Boo. You mentioned that you are the only fund manager who has seen all the Malaysia's bear market. So, we are really interested to know what is the first bear market you have encountered and experienced.
Well, the first Malaysian bear market was in 1973. It lasted about 2 years, from early 73 to the end of 74. And at that time, there was no KL Composite Index. So the index that you can use at that time was, for example, the OCBC index. And measured on the OCBC index, that bear market, which is the first for Bursa Malaysia, it plunged almost 80%, 80. It was very painful.
It is indeed a new knowledge for us, and some of us might not be born at that area. So it's a good chance to know about all this bear markets. Yeah. So moving on, we were open for questions. So if you have any questions for interest rate, please comment on our YouTube channels and Facebook channel. So the first question will be, what changes should Bank Negara and the next Malaysian government make to its monetary policies, if there are any, to counter the hiking interest rates?
I guess it's not just monetary policy, it's also fiscal policy. The two would have to be coordinated hand in hand. And it's not just the monetary and fiscal policy of Malaysia, because the events that are happening now are very interconnected. What happens in Ukraine, what happens in China, what happens in US, all interconnected, and they all have an impact on what Malaysia's monetary and fiscal policy will be. So, which is why we have this talk on 29th of October. It's a complex issue. If it's just like a Malaysian recession or a Malaysian inflation problem, then probably the answer is straightforward. But here you have not just a global dimension to it, you have multiple aspects. You have geopolitics, you have climate change, you have post pandemic, and then you have the monetary and fiscal policies of the major economies, whether it's US, Europe, UK, China, and so on. So, to be able to grapple, to be able to answer your question of what changes Bank Negara should make, then one has to understand the context. One has to understand the cause and effect relationship in the first place. And to explain that takes quite a bit of time. And obviously, a Facebook Live of about 30 minutes, 20 minutes, we are not able to go in depth. So, which is why we have this talk on 29th of October, so that we can go in detail and explain the issues involved.
Yeah. Thank you, Tingbu. So, as we know, that is Milton Friedman concept of free market capitalism, as in the case of the Iron Ladies revolution of privatizations for denationalizations across the UK throughout her term as Prime Minister, proven beneficial today, or has the sentiment wavered thanks to the rising global interest and inflation rates?
Okay, when you're talking about Milton Friedman, he's an economist who's died. He's famous as a monetarist in the sense that he believes that inflation is always a monetary phenomena. In other words, inflation is always caused by money. So that's Friedman, right? His views are very different from, say, economists like John Maynard Keynes, who is more of a classical type of economist. And in the case of Iron Lady, I think you got to explain, because many people may not know who Iron Lady is. It's definitely not referring to any of the local politicians. Iron Lady is Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister of Britain in the early 80s, who, together with Ronald Reagan, who was the president of US at the time, took a different economic philosophy to revive the economies. The economies in US, it was really suffering from almost more than a decade, about 15 years of stagflation. And UK was at that time was known as the sick man of Europe, because the UK economy was doing very badly. So this Iron Lady needed to do something radical to be able to rejuvenate the British economy. And both Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, what they did was to liberalize the market, and instead of taking a nationalization, which previous UK government did, then she sort of privatized them, and that sparked pretty strong economic growth in Britain.
I do agree. And Tingbu, do you have any like a book recommendation for this particular topic, since we touch on the UK economics and all the political stuff
Which topic are you referring to?
regarding the interest rate? Yeah.
I think for those who are new to the world of macroeconomics, the two most complex economic issues to deal with are foreign exchange and inflation. They are very complicated because there are a lot of moving parts, and Then if you want to understand interest rate, you have to understand, especially for any open economy like Malaysia, which is subjected to a lot of external factors. So you have to understand, to be able to understand uh, inflation in Malaysia, you have to understand forex and interest rate at the same time, because they are all intertwined. And uh, you cannot just say that I'm going to look only at inflation and therefore ignore uh, interest rate, because the cause and effect can work both ways. You can have high inflation leading to high interest rate, or high interest rate leading to high inflation. So to us, to recommend a book on these very complex issues, if you are new, if you're a beginner, then any macroeconomics textbook would be useful. I mean, those textbooks which are used in, say, NUS Singapore or University of Malaya, those textbooks would be a very good introduction. And then if you want to go, just focus on theories of inflation or forex exchange determination. That is another area altogether. There are a lot of good books, and I would recommend physical books instead of virtual books, because in the case of physical books, it's a lot easier and faster to read, and you can do a lot of notes. Um, I wouldn't want to be able, I wouldn't want to recommend a specific book, because it really depends on the level of knowledge of the person. But if you want, you go to Kinokuniya. Kinokuniya has got a, in KLCC, has got a very good selection of economics textbooks.
Well, thank you, Tengbu, for the book recommendations and also the suggestions. So if you are really interested, search for it and read it up. Oh, we have a questions on YouTube, which is from Daniel Chu. Do you foresee the Fed pausing or even backing down on the interest hike and or quantitative tightening once the economic starts to crack?
Yeah, I guess if the Federal Reserve sees that the US economy is really slowing down, and inflation has reached a plateau, yes, the Federal Reserve would pause, and then they would watch, and then see that if the slowdown continues and the labor market starts to weaken and inflation is steadily coming down, then you might even see a phase where the US Federal Reserve will start to think of easing the monetary policy. But the question is, then that question is, the answer to that question is pretty straightforward. The more difficult question is, when will the economy start to crack? Will it start to crack when the interest rates have gone up a lot more? Or will the US economy already, is the US economy already starting to crack now? And how does one decide, how does one judge whether the US economy has really, to use Daniel's term, how does one judge whether the US economy has really cracked or not cracked? So that uh, the US Federal Reserve looks at a lot of indicators, not just their favorite one, which is the PCE core index, which is the price personal consumption expenditure core price index. That's not the only one that they look at. So if you look at it across a wide range of indicators, there are indicators saying that the US in 2023 will certainly be in a recession. But you do not know how serious will it be. Will it be a mild? If it is mild, then inflation may not come down. If it's serious, inflation may come down, but you may have massive unemployment. So the many traditional indicators, leading indicators, are saying that the US is going to have a recession in 2023. So based on that, you may say that the US Federal Reserve should pause. But on the other hand, there are other indicators that say no, the US economy is still overheated. If you look at earnings, corporate earnings, the US corporate earnings, yes, they have been a lot of companies have missed their guidance, their forecast, but it's not a disaster. It's not as strong as what it was 2-3 quarters ago. It was not as strong as what expected, but it is not crashing. So corporate earnings are not telling you that the U.S. economy has cracked. Employment market in U.S. is still robust. Leading indicators like initial claims are still at very low levels. Unemployment rate is at very low level. And then the other indicators of inflation, wage growth is still strong. And then the services inflation, which is not so cyclical as food and energy prices, the services inflation are starting to climb and accelerating. So the US Federal Reserve is caught in a very bad dilemma. Right? Should I, because they have two mandates, the Federal Reserve has got two official mandates. One mandate is to make sure that there's price stability. And in the case of US, is 2% inflation. The other mandate is to make sure there's full employment. And these two mandates often will clash and contradict one another. So now your inflation rate, the US inflation rate is 5, 6, 7, 8%, whereas your official inflation target is 2%. So you're way above what you want your inflation rate to be, right? But at the same time, your employment market is full employment. So I guess to be able for the Federal Reserve to justify that I want to ease the monetary policy at this point in time, that is totally out of the question. Will they pause? I think that is also totally out of the question. They have another meeting, Federal FOMC meeting in 1st, 2nd November. The markets are already pricing in another major rate hike. The more important issue is what happens after the rate hike in November. So based on the current evidence, based on the current figures, the statistics that we have, easing is out of the question, and a pause is also out of the question.
Yeah.
But look, like I said, inflation is complicated. You have to understand what caused the inflation. And look, some people say that inflation is cost push and demand pull. Milton Friedman says that inflation is always a monetary phenomenon. My inflation theory is simple. Inflation will find its own level. Inflation is like water. Water will find its own level depending on the circumstances that are prevailing at that time. So then we have to determine what are the circumstances that are prevailing in the local economy and globally. Then you'll find that the inflation will find its own level. So it is complex because not just because of it is inflation, but because you have pandemic, post-pandemic, you have climate change, you have geopolitics, you have OPEC, which is a totally different organization from the past. So come to our talk on 29 October, where we can go into depth into all these major factors.
Yeah, thank you, Tingbu. Yeah, regarding the talk, Tingbu will actually share his insights on how high will the US interest rates to rise, and also how serious will the next recession be, and when will the China exit her dynamic zero COVID policy. Is the Ukrainian crisis near its end? Or what is Malaysia's political outlook? At the same time, what Malaysian sector and stock would you invest now and what to avoid? And I really totally agree that Tingpu quotations on inflations and describe it to the description of water. It really helped us to understand more in a simple way. Yeah. So the next one would be John asked about, is it possible to bring down annual inflation to 2% without first having the federal funds rate higher than the inflation rate?
Theoretically, it's possible. Theoretically, anything is possible, but in practical terms, it is not. Because the current inflation rate in US is so much higher than the Federal Reserve's target. It is, like I said, running at about 6-7%, whereas the official inflation rate is only 2%. So that is a big gap to bring down, and the Federal Reserve has a lot of work to do.
Yeah. So proceed to the next question on Facebook. Uh, Tingbu, how high do you think US interest will go and how long the recession will next year? And what makes you think that Russia or Ukraine wars will escalate to another level next year? So how will the latest US restriction of advanced chip export to China impact China development going forward?
The questions on David Lee are very pertinent, very complex. The first thing is there are four questions, but underneath the four questions, there are a layer of multiple sub questions. So, for example, the question that he asked about the US restrictions of high technology products to China, that in itself probably will take an hour or two to answer. And then, uh, what? Why do I think that the Ukrainian crisis will escalate to another level? I don't know. I don't know. So what we will do in 29th of October is to examine the Ukraine crisis in depth from both perspectives, from the Russian perspective, from the NATO US perspective, and then see what is the path that they can possibly take to make sure that it doesn't become a full-fledged war. Because both sides, on Russian side, on the NATO US side, I mean, basically NATO is fronting for US. It is basically a proxy war between Russia and US. Both sides are superpowers. Both sides have a lot of pride. And to be able to tell Russia not to do this, not to do that, it's not the same because Russia is not China. China will tell you, let's sit down and talk. Let's talk. Let's discuss. Let's negotiate. Russia's attitude is different. Look, you are next to my border. Ukraine is just bordering Russia. What is there to talk? You want to send your soldiers, you want to send the aid to Ukraine and help them fight Russia, we will fight. Not only will we fight, but if you cross a certain red line, we will use nuclear bombs, nuclear weapons. So you're dealing with two superpowers that have got a lot of egos involved. And in the case of Russia, their justification is that, look, you're talking about extending to my border, and that is where the red line is. So the issues that John Lee asked are very complicated. Sorry, David Lee asked are very complicated, and it cannot be answered in just a 2-3 minute kind of session. And how high will the interest rate go to? That is one of the key questions that we're going to answer in 29 October. And how long will the US recession be? How long will it be? Will depend on how high the US interest rate will rise. How high the US interest rate will rise to will depend on how high and how long will the US inflation rate stay at a dangerous level. So then we have to examine in detail what are the causes of inflation, what can cause the US inflation rate to stay high for a prolonged period. So, like I said, inflation and foreign exchange are the two most complicated economic subjects to deal with.
Yeah. Thank you, Tingbu. So we have a very interesting question again on YouTube from Oi. So read a lot about coming recession in US and UK. Does it mean that Malaysia, China, and other countries will be less affected by the recession?
The reason why we are having this series of talk this year, we had one in 19 March this year where we dealt with a multitude of issues, and now we're having one in 29 October is because locally and globally, the environment that we're in is something that the world has not seen for a long time. Since 2020, we've got to deal with pandemic. Now we've got to deal with post-pandemic. We've got to deal with soaring inflation in almost every country in the world except China. We've got to deal with geopolitics, not just between Russia and US in Ukraine, but also between China and US over Taiwan. And then you have climate change. Many people may have forgotten that in May, June, July this year, for the first time, you have severe heat waves, severe drought in China at the same time as Europe, UK, and US. So all the major countries, including Japan, all the major countries in the northern hemisphere faced severe extreme weather conditions for the first time. And that has impacted inflation. That has impacted, for example, in the case of olive oil production. The largest olive oil producer in Europe is Spain. And they expect, because of the heat wave of the drought in Spain this year, they expect olive oil output in Spain to be down by 40%. So the price of olive has shot up. And not only has output dropped, but the size of olive has become now smaller. So here is one simple example of how climate change, together happening at the same time with the Ukrainian crisis, happening at the same time with the supply chain disruption, the same time as soaring inflation from US, which is due to very poorly managed fiscal policy, all happening at the same time. So such a scenario facing the global community has not happened for a very long time. So which is why we're having this talk. And you look at the topics that we have on 29th of October, they seem to be unrelated, but if you look deeper, there is there are relationships between them. And then for us Malaysian, what is making it even more complicated is our Malaysia's political outlook, our Malaysia's very volatile, very uncertain political landscape. That has added on another major uncertainty to what is going to happen in the next couple of years.
Thank you, Tingbu. Well, we got a lot of questions running, and just type in our promo code to register on our event portal. The promo code is TALKBTB, TALKBTB, and log into our event portal. You will get a 70% discount. From 2,000 ringgit, you will pay only 600 ringgit. So from that, try to get registered because the deadline is 1 p.m. for the promo code and it's only limited to 10 participants. Right now, we will proceed to the next questions. Even though we are running out of time, so Tingbu, is it okay? Like another extra 10 minutes? Yeah. Okay, so you got another 10 minutes. So from Barry questions, is it likely that deep world recession after February 2023, or is it likely current war is getting worse after 2023?
I'm not sure why Barry talks about February. I'm not clear as to why he chose that particular month. I hope it's not to do with my birthday because my birthday falls on February. So, nevertheless, right? Will the world see a deep recession in 2023? Let's put down as a range of. I mean, it is a complex situation. The answer is not going to be easy because there are going to be a lot of assuming this, assuming this, assuming that, right? Assuming that the US inflation doesn't get worse, then maybe the global recession may not be so bad. But that's only the US, because at the same time, the EU inflation is worse than US. And the European side, the EU, their monetary tightening is way behind time. If you compare with the inflation rate, if you compare the EU monetary tightening with the Federal Reserve, they're behind time. So, and we do not know because the EU embargo of the Russian oil and gas is going to kick in only in December, which is another 1.5 months to go. What will happen then? What will happen to gas and oil price in that area, in that part of the world? So there are a lot of question marks. But what we have to do now, what we can do now is we cannot give you an accurate answer because that's beyond any person's capability. But what we can do now is to ask the right question, ask the right questions so that we can have a sense of what direction the world economy is going to head, where the stock market is going to head, and then maybe from there we can make a better decision. So, will the world suffer a deep recession like in 2008 or like in 1973? 1973, the recession globally was very severe. I would say that the chances are not low. Can we have a mild recession in US? Possible, because a lot depends on the next couple of months. The next couple of months are very crucial. If for some reason NATO and Putin can say, let's sit down and talk and let's call a ceasefire, then immediately one of the major causes of tension, of inflation, will be removed. Or in the case of US, you have the midterm election, November. If the Democrats win, then you have a certain outlook for US fiscal policy. If the Republicans don't win, if the Democrats don't win, if the Republicans win the midterm election, then that has another impact on US fiscal policy, which has an impact on US inflation, which has an impact on US interest rate. So you find that if you watch UK, where the political turmoil is even worse than Malaysia. You have a prime minister that's only there for 44 days. You have 4 finance ministers in 4 months. So what will happen to the political situation in US has a major impact on the economics outlook for US, which then has an impact on the global economy. Then of course you have China. Will China exit from the zero COVID policy? And how is China going to do it? And will China's economy rebound? Or will the Chinese consumers be so worried, will be so conservative, so prudent that they will probably hold on first before they start consuming again? So these are some of the questions that we want to ask, and then we'll explore the different types of scenarios, the different type of possibilities.
Sure. Thank you, Teng Bu. And we have a question from Dan talking about first time to hear inflation is like water. Can you elaborate more about this?
Oh, Dan, it's going to take a long time. Yes, you're right. No economist has ever come up with the theory. I most likely have to maybe do a trademark or intellectual property as the first one to say that to understand inflation, inflation will find its own level, which is like water. And like I earlier said, it's if you use the analogy of water, right? How high will water rise to? How high will the water subside to? It really depends on the topography, on the circumstances surrounding the pool of water in that place at that time, right? So if you have a situation where uh, all the drains clog up and you have heavy rain, and then suddenly the downpour comes in, then you find that the water will rise up and you get flash floods. So the same analogy will be used for inflation. So if it's a normal type where you have too much money chasing too few goods, then okay, then you find that maybe that is demand pull. Then okay, you slow down the demand, and therefore you will get an equilibrium in demand and supply, and inflation will start to subside. But here, like I mentioned a while ago, you have so many unprecedented events, pandemic, unprecedented, climate change, extreme weather condition, unprecedented. If you have been monitoring what is happening in Australia, Victoria, Melbourne has got 5 major floods in less than 2 years. I mean, you're not talking about 1 day, 1 hour flash flood, where after 2 hours the water subsides. You're talking about floods that last for days. And they've suffered 5 major floods in less than 2 years. It's never happened before. A week or two ago, Sydney had the wettest day ever in its record. And it's not supposed to be so wet at this point in time. So we have to examine. So that's why what we'll do in capital dynamics case, and what we'll do on 29th of October is to survey the entire environment and see what sort of circumstances are prevailing, and then from there get a sense of whether inflation rate is going to subside or whether it's going to stay high and for how long.
Sure. Thank you, Teng Bu. And maybe we can take this title into consideration to have a new talk again. Yeah. So those who wanted to join our talk, please register with the promo code. And don't forget that we were choosing the best comment winner right now. So just give us some time. The special giveaway prizes will actually be our 1 year Capital Dynamics newsletter subscription, iCapital newsletter. Then in both full access, which is the digital and the physical version. So iCapital newsletter is our weekly investment publication with very detailed research and analysis. And we will also provide weekly independent, comprehensive, and also objective advice to you guys. So if you are really into investment and interested about the global economic outlook, please subscribe and we will choose the giveaway winner right now. So Tingbu, which is the giveaway winner?
Oh, then I got to remember all the questions. Then should have told me earlier so I can remember all the questions and their names. I got to remember the question, I got to remember the names. Maybe you could run by the question and the names again. I mean, then I can remember because that's the last question, right? Where he asked about inflation is like water, and that's the first time. I think that's for him to be able to pick up that comment from me. I think that is really great. So he definitely deserves the special prize. What else do we have? We have David Lee. David Lee asking, I think, 5, 6 questions, right? So probably we'll give him a prize as well because he asked so many questions, and some of the questions are complicated, right? So maybe these are the two that I can remember.
Sure. Thank you, Tingbu. So we will select Dan and David Lee as our giveaway winner. So congratulations again, and don't forget that we will have a weekly live section every Saturday. What is more is we will have a special live section at 1 p.m. next Saturday, which is after our talk. Tingbu will be sharing something interesting for all of us once he has conducted the investment talk. So once again, don't forget to follow us on YouTube and Facebook and also Instagram and also LinkedIn. And subscribe on our newsletter if you are really interested to know more about investment advice. And thank you and hope to see you at our next live section. It will be on 4th November and Saturday 11 a.m. So next week it will be 1 p.m. So see you at our 29 investment talk. Bye everyone and take care and enjoy your weekend. So hope you enjoy your vacations and happy Diwali and thank you.